Hey guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and hopefully this will get connected because swear to goodness, my audio is always screwing up for some reason every other second. It is a day as per usual. Okay. Well, we will get our audio working out. As per usual, there are technical difficulties, and it is on. We're here. We are working, and as per usual, the duct tape and candy cane sort of holy water production is on top of it. Sorry, we had to unferrule the room, the studio, if you will. I love it. It's all bougie. It's the studio now. We are here for The State Strikes Back. If we remember from yesterday, we had to sit through Helen Lovejoy's what can only be described as possibly the dumbest thing I have ever heard in my entire life. Boiled down to, she didn't have a bowel movement, uh, she prevented him from leaving. She could have hit him first. He was big sad, and she stopped talking to him. Uh, and you could tell pregnant lady, state defender was having all none of that. So the state is ready to strike back. And even Gareth, looked a little chagrined that the defense attorney well, she also said, "Hey, he told jokes. He was being funny. He is obviously not guilty. He was being funny. He didn't run away. He went to his house, and, he was sad, so he called his Tinder date." I mean, the excuses she used, I have never in my life. Griffin comes up with better, Robler excuses for when I find his graffiti tags over the house. I suggest, Gareth, that if you do go up on appeal, should the verdict not come out super innocent, I know I will be shocked with the defense that you've put on thus far, that you perhaps hire my youngest, most feral to defend you, because at least then it will be a hilarious defense, or at least more cogent. But let's see what the state has to say. We are still on verdict watch. I am going to pull that up as well because we do have verdict watch going. They are doing verdict watch, I know. Now, there is nothing going, obviously, as of yet. Let's see. Looks like they are still waiting for the jury to arrive. um, which is again, I believe it's 10 o'clock there. So, it's Halloween. Or not Halloween, it's morning up there. It's not Halloween, it's California. Sorry. As soon as I got off the stream with Nicholas, there was something about a New York cult that I just had to go on and put something on, so I got all in the Halloween mindset. So, let us see what this state prosecutor has to say because she looked like she was a little bit frustrated with some of the things that Helen had to say.
His emotions, that dam burst and the floodwaters were released, and he could no longer control the tsunami of his emotions.
All right.
Prosecution has not proven that Gareth Pursehouse went there to kill or harm Amy Harwith. The prosecution has not proven he deliberately caused her to fall over the balcony railing. Prosecution has not disproven that Gareth Pursehouse was acting due to his emotional provocation, nor have they disproven he acted in the heat of passion. For these reasons, we ask you to return a just and proper verdict in this case. We ask you to find Gareth Pursehouse not guilty of first-degree murder and not guilty of the lying in wait special circumstance. Thank you.
I don't understand what they want him to find. So in the defense's mind, I guess I want her to break down what they would like to find him guilty of. What, like struggle hugging and unin uninvited house guestery? I mean, just what is it you think that he should be charged with, ma'am? I Oh, she just the defense was infuriating, infuriating. I'm so irritated with her, I can't even.
Thank you, Councilor. Carry on.
Oh, I forgot to No, I think I put this up there. I can't remember if I twittered or not.
Ladies and gentlemen, if this runs over a little bit, is that a problem? Just so we can finish today? Is that all right? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
I promise I won't speak for as long as Ms. Ferguson Lab or Mr. Avila, so I'll get you out of here as soon as possible. Now, as Ms. Bernstein-Lev gives her closing argument, I want to remind you, jurors, that during opening statement,
I
when Mr.
hope so.
Frenzel gave
I
his
don't
opening
know.
statement, he gave a pretty different story of what you were going to hear during this trial. He stated that during this case,
Opening statement is not evidence.
Overruled, Councilor, you may continue.
like I said, during his opening statement, he stated that the defendant went over to Amy's house with the intent to kill himself. And that when a struggle ensued, Amy, on her own volition, climbed over a 3.5-foot balcony and fell to her death. Now, you heard a different story here by Ms. Bernstein-Lev. And that story is
Your Honor, I'm gonna
that the
object-
defendant just
I'm going to object to the reference to suicide based on court's prior rulings.
Well, no, I think it cuts both ways. I'm going to allow Councilor to continue.
Helen, you
Now, in this instance, when Ms. Bernstein-Lev gave her argument, you heard something different. She said that the defendant went to Amy's house out of a sense of desperation just to talk to her. And that it was Amy that physically initiated an aggressive struggle between the two of them, and that she climbed over the balcony and fell to her death. Now, what's important to note about these different versions of events that each of the defense attorneys has presented to you is that it's a story. That's all it is. A story concocted by the defense has absolutely no basis in fact. Or again. Like I said, the different version of events the defense is giving you is simply that, a story. A story concocted by the defense with absolutely no basis in
Your
fact
That's improper argument.
and absolutely no.
Concocted by the defense is improper argument.
You may take it as such, but in so many words, the prosecution's version of what occurred, I think, was also attacked by the defense in their closing. So you may continue.
I'm going to try to finish my sentence one more time. Each version of the events the defense attorneys have given you is simply a story. A story concocted by the defense that has absolutely no basis in fact, nor is it supported by the evidence. Now, members of the jury, as jurors in this case, it's up to you to decide what happened in this case. You decide the facts based on the witnesses that you heard, based on the evidence that's been admitted, and based on what you heard throughout this entire trial. And then it's also your job to apply the law to the facts that you've determined. Now, I tell you that the evidence that you've heard throughout this trial establishes the prosecution's theory of this case. And that is that the defendant came to Amy's house with the intent to kill her when he brought that loaded syringe with a lethal dose of nicotine, that he broke into her home, that he took her by surprise, beat her up, strangled her, and then dropped her over the balcony to her death. That's what the evidence establishes in this case. Unlike what the defense told you, it's not a story. It's based in fact, It's based on evidence. Now, I told you about your duty as jurors to determine what happened in this case and how to apply the law. But there's something else that I want you guys to think about when you go back into the deliberation room, and just some pitfalls that I want to warn you about. And that is wanting more. I think I touched on this in voir dire just a little bit. We talked about that burglary analogy I used of the car. But it's natural. As human beings, we always want to know more. More background, more witnesses, more police reports. Even though it's natural to think that way, you have to base your decision and deliberation process on what occurred in trial with actual evidence. Jurors tend to play this what if. What if Amy arrived at the hospital earlier? What if there were more Nest videos? What if the defendant changed his mind? I mean, these questions were specifically answered in trial, right? Dr. Lucy said if Amy was right outside of the OR, probably wouldn't have made a difference. If there were more Nest videos, we didn't have any. The police did everything they could to get all the Nest videos that Ms. Farley possessed. And based on the defendant's conduct before, during, and after the murder, he never changed his mind. But nonetheless, don't engage in that what if game. Don't speculate. And we'll get to this later on in my argument, but that is exactly what Ms. Bernstein lab is having to do. Speculate, speculate, speculate. Based on the statements on the law and the statement of the evidence that you heard in the actual trial.
Oh,
Don't make it personal. We all come from different backgrounds. We all have different unique experiences. And I think there's a tendency to think, if I were the victim, I would have done this. If I were the defendant, I would have done this. I caution you from doing that. Instead, again, listen to the evidence and base your decision on the evidence you heard in trial. Refusing to deliberate with other jurors. Now, again, you can only come to a decision if all of you agree. So remember, this is a collaborative process. Now, I don't think that none of you or any of you would decide to not deliberate or get along, but remember, keep an open mind and respect each other's opinions. Using the possible doubt standard. Look, you can have some doubt about non-issues in this case. Again, there's always going to be unanswered questions. But do not hold us, Mr. Avila and I, to an impossible burden. Do not hold us to a burden that's beyond a shadow of doubt, beyond any imaginary doubt, because as the jury instructions specifically say, anything in life is subject to some possible or imaginary doubt. The standard of proof in this case is beyond
not
a
the
reasonable doubt.
mic.
Verdict forms. They can be confusing, so I'm just going to touch on it really quick. It's just, if you find the defendant is guilty of burglary, you fill out that verdict form. You then have to decide whether or not there was a person present. If you find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder, you fill out that verdict form. And then you must determine whether or not the special circumstance of lying in wait is true or not true. Voluntary manslaughter, heat of passion. Now, there are some misstatements about what the law actually states in Ms. Bernstein and Le's argument. So I'm going to go through this very carefully. The elements of this crime, the heat of passion, or a killing done in the heat of passion, is the following. 1, the defendant was provoked. 2, as a result of the provocation, the defendant acted rashly and under the influence of intense emotion that obscured his judgment. 3, that the provocation would have caused a person of average disposition to act rashly and without deliberation, that is from passion rather than judgment. Some key points I want to point out to you in regards to this specific jury instruction. While there's no specific type of provocation required, slight or remote provocation is not sufficient. Not sufficient.
Wait a
The
minute.
defendant,
So you mean her not answering his text messages and him being the big old sad? That's not a provocation? I am both shocked and horrified. How was Gareth to survive with the one and only therapist in California not returning his calls?
is not allowed to set up his own standard of conduct. Consider whether a person of average average disposition in the same position, knowing the same facts, would have reacted from passion rather than from judgment. That being said, I'm going to give you examples of what is not voluntary manslaughter or what is not provocation. It's not enough that a person is mad. It's not enough that a person is upset. It's not enough that a person is desperate. It's not enough that a person is sad.
Gareth's like, yes,
Or
it
It is
is.
not an argument or a fight that went bad. That is not provocation. So there has to be some sort of trigger, a provoking act, and that provocation would have caused a person of average disposition to act rationally and without due deliberation that is from passion rather than from judgment. And don't let the defense confuse you with the use of the word passion. Just because Ms. Bernstein used that word repeatedly doesn't mean you adopt the meaning that Ms. Bernstein is giving you. There is a legal meaning that qualifies as passion under the law. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about just this tenet of killing in the heat of passion. It's an incredibly important part of our law. It allows for the mitigation of the killing of one human being based on heat of passion. I'll give you an example. Let's say walk in on your child being sexually assaulted and that person is killed. Another instance, someone discovers that an immediate family member was just murdered and that person kills the perpetrator. Now, in those specific situations, any normal person of average and normal disposition would be so overwhelmed with emotion, so overcome by anger and passion, that would drive that person to use deadly force.
I really do like how this state's prosecution has really broken this down into real life examples. And again, those of us who've had the opportunity to have, lawyers really break this down and give us real life examples have had this opportunity to have someone kind of explain this in easy to understand and digest terms. But the state, in my opinion, has done a really good job of breaking this down and explaining this to the jury in a way that the defense can't hoodwink them by saying, but he was the big sads. He was all the sads and she wouldn't return his text messages. What was a man to do?
Force and kill. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a killing done in the heat of passion. Let me tell you what's not an example of a heat of passion killing. Let's say there's a man who runs into someone who ridiculed him and
This
mocked
is where
him
we're going to
for
get to
years
the
in high school, making his life a living
caddies.
hell. And he runs into him years later and decides to kill him. Now, that killing was done out of a desire to get back at that guy for the years of torment. That was a killing done out of revenge. That is not a heat of passion killing. That is not voluntary manslaughter. Now, similar in this case, you have the defendant who is now claiming that he was provoked by Amy and that he killed her out of the heat of passion. The defendant, after running into her, after breaking up with her or the relationship ending nearly 9 years prior, and running into her at the Eggs Fizz Awards, he then kills her a month later. That is not a heat of passion killing. Like I said, he can't now claim that Amy provoked him when he's the one that broke into her home, when he's the one who provoked a physical struggle between himself and the victim. It does not justify him going to her house, uninvited, breaking in.
But the defense said she threw the first punch because she was startled by his uninvited house guestery. I mean, honestly, ma'am, did you not listen to the defense babbling for 2 hours, or it felt like 37 years? I'm pretty sure all of my life she's been babbling.
beating her, strangling her, and then tossing her over a balcony. That is not justified under the law. That is not heat of passion as defined by the law. Now, I want to talk to you about assuming, just for argument's sake, just for a second, that we believe the defense's argument. That we believe, you know what? Amy was the person who was initially aggressive with the defendant. Let's just pretend that that's what happened for 1 second.
Oh, I mean, okay.
Well, if that's the case, Amy was
Wait a minute.
perfectly within.
Wait a minute. 1 second. I have to arm myself for this argument. Sorry. Thor. Let's see if this will fit on with my. Oh, I'm sacrificing good hair for this. I hope you are all amused. All right, we have the tinfoil hat on. Let's go ahead with the tinfoil. She threw the first punch, and go.
In her right to defend herself in her own home, especially when you take into account her state of mind at the time of this incident. Specifically, when you consider what happened at the ex-biz awards between the defendant and Amy. This email, which has been shown by both Mr. Avila and Ms. Bernstein, I'm going to go through it really quickly, really goes to show not just what happened at the ex-biz awards, but how it truly made Amy feel. Now, Ms. Lev came up here and talked about this email, and she entirely focused this email as to, again, how the defendant feels. How he must have been feeling when he saw Amy. But this email was written by Amy. Not only does it talk about her fear, but it talks about just how angry, not desperate, angry the defendant was at the ex-biz awards. She starts the email with, "Tonight I felt very scared." That is the first thing she types up in that email when she comes home later that morning from the ex-biz awards. He says, "Garrett came up behind me and started screaming, 'Why are you here?' He looked dysregulated and his eyes looked out of control. He started screaming, 'You don't even like porn. You shouldn't be here. Why are you here?' He looked like he was going to cry. He was breathing heavily, flailing his arms around. I didn't want to make a scene or scare anybody else." She goes on. "We sat close by the bathrooms. I made sure to look and make sure there were both security people and a lot of attendees very close by." She was so scared, even at the ex-biz awards, that when she pulled him aside, she wanted to make sure she was around other people and security guards. "I was scared and felt like I needed to neutralize the situation." I mean, Amy's a wonderful person. Her ex-boyfriend from 8, nearly 9 years prior to that, is screaming at her, and she takes it upon herself to try to calm him down and neutralize the situation. "He told me he lost his job." Continues on. What's important to note here in the second sentence is he couldn't stop obsessing over me. He recited text messages that I sent from this time frame about 9 years ago. Recited the date, who they were to, and exactly what they said, word for word. I couldn't believe it. Again, I was very scared. She ends the email. "I'm pretty nervous that I'm more on his radar now. It terrifies me that he's obsessed with me for 9 years. He thinks about me every day, can't move on, cries, and despite what Miss Bernstein said about Fernando Chavez making up the word tantrum, she says in her own email, and throws tantrums in this way. He's focused on harming me. I'm hoping that this interaction and listening and giving him time may cause a neutralization in his anger towards me." Now, you don't have to just take Amy's word for what happened at the ex-visit ward. You can take a look at Hernando Chavez's testimony.
You know, I just for the sake of all womankind, womanhood, but also just for my own sanity and, karmic justice, what have you. I do hope that that um allegedly in Minecraft, Pac-Man, Tetris, Fortnite, uh the new Baldur's Gate and, whatever new Nintendo game that they're coming out with, that, Amy was the one that allegedly, delivered that, shaving incident black eye. I mean, I do hope that she got a couple shots in. If we're being honest. I mean, if I just I cannot believe that the defense went the vulgarity of making Amy the aggressor. It was it was a pretty it was almost the level of vulgarity, um, in the Theodore Edgecombe case where they're like, the wife didn't even love him. I mean, she went over and, like, she checked his wallet and tried to hide a weapon and, you know, purported to love, you know, her husband, but she just, she was going to look for his money and stuff. I mean, I have never heard this is up there with one of the more offensive arguments I've heard, a as far as, just against common decency. You'd think that that would be something maybe they would have like, "Hey, other schmo from the office, I'm gonna run something by you, and I want you to tell me how you think this is gonna play out." And, they run this by and they're gonna say, "Hey, I have a question." And it's time for the board of truth. Because we're still on verdict watch, and I don't even think they've gotten to the court yet. But let's go through what the defense put up as let's see, let's go through the line items of the defense, as it were. So, let's see. The line items of the defense was Amy was a hypocrite, so she was at the well, first, she was at the Hardys. I'm gonna go ahead and spell it like this. She was at the Hardys, so that was one. Then, well, she cut off all contact, so 0 contact. He was increasing sad. Uh, let's see. He had no way to get a hold of her, so he had to break in to talk to her. I mean, that was the only way he was going to ever get closure. There were no other therapists. So, had to break in, just had to. So, we'll just put in a window here and a brick. Okay, so he had to break in. And then Amy threw the first punch. Amy punch. She attacked him. I mean, what was he to do? Here is Amy. She is here. I mean, she was going crazy. You know how women do. They get startled in their house by an uninvited, unknown house guest that's, bigger than them, stronger than them. And uh, they are so impolite that they strike them first. I mean, what was he to do? It, and how dare she? How dare she do that? How dare she? Also, after the non I mean, struggle hug, that even the ME around the neck, struggle hug around the neck, you know, she didn't have a chart. So You know, how can they even claim that she was unconscious? How can they even claim that she was unconscious if she didn't have a chart? This is injustice, I tell you, according to the defense. No chart? No way. All right. So then she was blocking him, or she, and then before all of this, she provoked him by even existing. I mean, how daggone dare she? Before all of this, she just existed. I mean, how dare she? And then she tried to run away from him and happened to just go over, the balcony. I mean, she is athletic. Did you not see that picture? I mean, again, we had I don't think you saw the defense's best evidence, which let me see if I can draw this. Look, I'm not I can't draw you like your French women, Jack, but I mean, she had a picture of herself on said balcony. I mean, how can you deny? I mean, she took a picture of herself scantily clad, and obviously I can't draw. No proportionality ever. I'm working on the next Pixar animation. Uh, but I mean, out. The most important thing is that she had a picture of herself in lingerie on that balcony. So obviously, she was full on parkour Assassin's Creed ready to go. I I mean, this was her closing statement. I don't know how he's not guilty. I mean, innocent, I tell you. I don't know why the state is even up. I get them shackles up off this man, tell him to go get a shower and wash his hair because he will be on the town tonight, don't you think? You guys, she has a law
As
degree and I
well
don't.
as Aspen Jameson. Remember, Aspen Jameson has no stake in the game. She doesn't know the victim. She doesn't know the defendant. They both came in here and testified. Dr. Chavez said, "You ruined my life, you bitch." He heard the defendant say that. Miss Jameson, again, who has zero stake in the game, isn't friends with either of the parties involved, says she heard something to the effect of, "You fucking ruined my life." And if you recall her testimony, she stated that she heard the defendant not only screaming at her, but cursing her. So that anger was definitely
Oh, I
was
didn't know
definitely
word
apparent.
game. Interesting.
Now, like I said, this encounter at the XBiz Awards wasn't just a display of the defendant's anger, but really it demonstrated just how terrified Amy was of the defendant. And we know this based upon other things. Not only the encounter at the XBiz Awards scare Amy, but so did the repeated attempts by the defendant to contact her the very next day after the XBiz Awards, where the defendant admits to looking up her phone number and finding her. He then texts her. Amy, being nice, tries to neutralize the situation as she did at the awards, so that glad we had a chance to speak. Sounds like we both need to express and hear some things from the other person. The defendant goes on to say, "Not sure if you're done." Because you said, "How do we finish this now last night? But if we can meet again." He wants to see her again. And how does Amy react? Amy, again, takes a very neutral position in trying to calm the defendant down. I think it was really good that we were able to speak last night. I'm sure there's a lot more that you want to process and say to me, but I think that was a lot for both of us. I hope you were able to hear me last night when I said that I was sorry for anything that caused you suffering, and that I forgive you for the things that you did to me. I think right now it's best to have some space, and I don't mean that in a negative way. The past is sad and triggering for both of us. I think we ended our talk last night well. We can be civil from a distance, respect each other, and move forward with our own lives. Amy politely tells him that she doesn't want to communicate with him anymore. that she
She's a
doesn't
lot
want him
nicer than
back
I
in
would
her
have been.
But the defendant doesn't take a hint. He doesn't take no for an answer. He again texts her 2 hours later. This tirade, so you're still gone, which is exactly my nightmare. It's sadly what I expected. So on and so forth. We saw this text message earlier, so I'm not going to reread it. He goes on again, further to text her. I don't know how busy you are, and it truly scares me so much more than I could possibly convey to say this. Please don't just vanish on me. Please don't let me go through that again. Again, reaching out to her, begging for her to be back in his life. No response by Amy. Again, he texts her almost 5 hours later. Please call me. Again, no response by Amy. The next day, he even leaves a voicemail for Amy. Again, also, Amy decides not to respond. She's done. She wants no more contact with the defendant. And this repeated effort by the defendant to reach out to her only further scares her more. And you know this from all of the conversations she had with her friends. She tells Renato Chavez that Gareth found her number online and messaged her. She says, I told him I didn't want to talk and wished him the best, but his response was still obsessive and scary. She talks about a handyman coming in to put more locks on the windows and that she actually got pepper spray. She said that he sounds unstable because he keeps texting her. She talks to Robert Koshler, who she also describes to him about running into the defendant at the ex-Biz Awards, about how he acted really crazy and how he's obsessed with her. She ends the text message by saying, I took safety measures today, or realistically scared for my safety. My anxiety isn't bad now. I just realistically think something could happen to me. During her dinner and walk with Sarah Rollins, she specifically tells her, and you heard her testify, that Amy was scared of what he might do to harm her or her clients. She texts Marcy Mendoza, I had to block Gareth. He continues to message me after I told him I did not want to have contact. He even said that you sent your psychic energy to control the Star Trek episode that he's watching that reminded him of me. This is really scary. Do you notice the word scary or the word scared? How many times has Amy used that to describe the defendant's conduct?
Wait,
To Grace Stanley.
she used her mental energy to disrupt his Star Trek. Was it the new Star Trek? Because those episodes are screwed up anyway. I mean, it's Kurtzman Trek. It's Star Trek STD. I don't know what to tell you. But they were going to be screwed up to begin with. Sir, what a weirdo.
I'm more concerned about my safety right now with Gareth's situation. I blocked him through text message, but because of his level of obsession,
Norbert,
I
no,
definitely don't think I'm in the clear.
not the
I
mic.
have pepper spray at the house
I know
now.
you're the
My
star, but
roommate's on
stop.
work. I'm upping my home security cameras. So what do you take from all of this? Okay. If we assume that the argument that defense counsel is posing to you, that Amy was initially aggressive with the defendant when she ran into him into her house, at her house, she was definitely afraid of the
Yes,
defendant.
I
at
love
this
you
time.
deeply. Stop being a cuddle whore. Stop.
So it's no shock that she was unhappy to see him when
Not
she
the
goes up the
mic.
stairs and sees him waiting in this dark TV media room for her and takes her by surprise. She made very clear that she wanted nothing to do with him, didn't want to see him, and wanted absolutely no contact with him. And she's terrified of him. And that's what she sees when she comes home at around 1 a.m. on Valentine's Day to see the defendant, 6'4", 230, fit and buff, standing or sitting or waiting for her in that dark TV media room. How do you think she's going to react? She's absolutely entitled to defend herself in her own home.
She was going to say
The
neo
defendant's
nuts.
obsession with Amy does not justify his actions. His renewed anger towards her when seeing her at the X-Biz Awards doesn't justify his actions. And this intense desire to have Amy back in his life also doesn't justify his actions. Now, members of the jury, I want to talk to you about heated passion in this last sentence here. Is that based on everything I told you, the defendant can't now claim that he killed Amy in a heat of passion, that Amy provoked him. He cannot create his own standard of conduct. But when it was him that broke into her home, took her by surprise, beat her up, strangled her, and then killed her. That is not how the law of voluntary manslaughter works. I want to talk to you about provocation. Now, provocation can indeed reduce murder from first degree to second degree. But in this instance, the evidence establishes that there's no provocation in this case. Now, I discussed provocation in the context of voluntary manslaughter, but now I want to talk about provocation in the context of the crime of murder. And there's just simply no provocation in this instance. In fact, the evidence establishes that not only was there no provocation, but the defendant acted with intent to kill Amy. And he did so with premeditation and deliberation. So there can't be provocation.
Oh, you are the
The defendant planned
biggest
this. He
whore
prepared for
ever,
this.
Thor.
He
Oh my
intended
God.
to kill her all along.
You are
Now, the defense will have you believe, again, that Amy, on her own volition, climbed over this balcony to get away from the defendant. And during trial, they alluded to some damage on the awning, that perhaps she tried to reach underneath that awning to leverage herself and scale down to a third-story building. Look, you've heard a lot of things about Amy in this trial. She's smart. She's intelligent. She's beautiful. She's a therapist. She has her PhD. She's admittedly fit and athletic. But what you didn't hear is that Amy Harwick is Spider-Man. And I say this not to be funny, but because that's exactly what the defense will have you believe. They will have you believe that she climbed over this balcony to get away from the defendant and scaled down her third-story house. That's what they'll have you believe. Not only is that nonsensical, but it's completely unreasonable. And in the words of Ms. Bernstein-Webb, that's what's ludicrous. And I'll tell you why. If she was trying to scale down her building, her balcony, hanging from it, reaching her feet under there, well, she would have fallen in a completely different way. Okay? And we heard from Dr. Luzzi's injuries that Amy Harwick had. She had injuries to her head. And the one injury to her head that's important is that she had a subdural hemorrhage on the right side of her head. She had a fracture to her scapula. Her pelvis was shattered, causing the severe liver lacerations and internal injuries to her kidney. That means she fell onto her pelvis and then onto her right side. Now, she also had injuries to her face. Irrespective of the nasal fracture that Dr. Luzzi saw on her face, she also had other injuries that were evidence of her being beat up by the defendant. Injuries around her facial area, which is marked by the diagram on the left, as well as injuries to her hands and arms, which are also documented on the diagram to the right, which are admitted into evidence. Now, if she had fallen from hanging from the balcony, perhaps to break or fall with her hands, you would have seen fractures or completely different set of injuries to her hands and arms. If she landed on her feet, she would have had injuries to her legs, fractures to her legs, fractures to her feet. If she fell face first, you would have had a wide pattern of injuries, like the subdural hemorrhage that Dr. Luzzi talked about on the stand. Her injuries themselves do not support the contention that she was trying to get down from the balcony and happened to fall. Now, another reason why this is a completely nonsensical, sort of ludicrous version of events is, think about it. You heard how Michael Herman, when he heard the struggle, yelled out, "Hey, motherfucker." Now, you heard
We just all love
also
that we
from
get to use
Dr.
cursey
Lucy
words and
that due to the strikes that she
trial.
had to the head, due to the strangulation based on both the internal and external examination of Amy Harwick, it was likely that she was unconscious. It only takes 15 or 20 seconds to render someone unconscious from strangling them. And Ms. Bernstein-Lev can try to undermine the strangulation issue with Michael Herman as much as she wants. The fact that she was strangled is not based on just what Michael Herman heard about choking. And there was a misstatement by Ms. Bernstein-Lev during her closing argument. That is not the first time that Michael Herman talked about hearing Amy Harwick being choked. In fact, he called detectives on February 17th saying, "I remember more." And when they interviewed him on February 20th, he talks about how he heard Amy being choked. And he testified at preliminary hearing that he heard that Amy was being choked. And you heard that during redirect by Mr. Avila during trial. But irrespective of what Michael Herman had to say, we know she was strangled because of the autopsy photos that you saw, because of the testimony that Dr. Luzzi talked about. And he talked about that she was either unconscious or in such a weakened state because of her energy being expended after being strangled by the defendant. So is the defense saying that after being unconscious or in a weakened state, Amy thought to herself, "You know what? The best way to get away from this guy is to jump over or climb over the balcony and scale down the building like Spider-Man, or run towards the stairs towards my screaming roommate to get away from the defendant." It just doesn't make sense that someone who is either unconscious or in such a weak state would choose to go over the balcony and scale the building versus running downstairs towards her screaming roommate towards help. It just does not make sense. Now, I talked about how there's no provocation in this case, and that the defendant acted with premeditation and deliberation when he intended to kill Amy Harwick. And we know this based on his actions. It makes it apparent that he was planning to commit this murder, and that on the night of February 14th, 2020, he took deliberate steps to carry out this very murder. The first is, we know that he went from his house in Cabora Street, Playa del Rey, to Amy's home in the Hollywood Hills. That's 16 miles. In LA, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes to get there. And that whole time, he never turned around. He never thought, you know what, this is a really bad idea. I'm just going to stay home on Valentine's Day. No, in that 20 minutes, he makes the affirmative decision that I'm going to go and kill. I'm on a mission. I'm going to go and kill Amy Harwick. When he gets there, he doesn't park in front of Amy's house. I mean, if you just want to talk to her, why don't you just park in front of her house, right? No, he decides to park somewhere around Ivar Street and Vine. And instead of just walking to the front door like a normal person, or wait for her
I think
outside,
we've established
he climbs
Gareth
up
isn't
this
a
hill
normal person. I mean,
behind Amy's neighbor's house to access Amy's house. Now let's just pause for a moment. How does the defendant even know where Amy lives? How does he know that by climbing up this hill, he's going to be able to get into Amy's house? That's because he had to do his own independent research and figure out not only where she lived, but the access points to her house, the neighboring properties, and the neighboring streets. That is preparation. That is planning for a murder. In addition to climbing up this hill, he goes and lands here, the neighbor's landing. And when doing that,
he's
I mean,
more
he's
recent than
dressed
Darren
for this mission. He's dressed to kill.
Lopez.
He's wearing a hat to cover his head. He's wearing gloves. He has that rope or string tied around his shorts. And on his person, he's carrying that syringe loaded with a lethal dose of nicotine.
You are heavy, sir.
Now, why wear these items, right? The hat, obviously, to cover your head.
Oh,
The string around his waist. I mean, they found those shorts or something that looks like those shorts at the defendant's house. And those shorts already have like a black drawstring inside. So we know it's not wearing that to keep his pants up. That's a tool that he wanted to use in implementing the murder, whether that be to tie me up, use it to strangle her, what have you. And the gloves. Why would anybody wear gloves? If you want to talk to Amy, why are you wearing gloves? What's the purpose of that? It's clearly not a very cold night. He's wearing shorts out late at night or in the middle of the night. Why are you wearing gloves? It's so that you don't leave your fingerprints behind. It's so you don't leave your DNA behind. So that you don't leave any trace of yourself behind so that you can be ID'd later in a crime that you just committed. All of this is preparation. So let's talk about the syringe. Now, according to defense, he just brought this syringe for some other purpose. It wasn't to kill Amy Harwick. It was for something else. But members of the jury, let's straighten something out right now about some misstatements that Ms. Bernstein-Lev said. This is not a syringe the defendant possessed for months and years as evidenced by the color. And according to the testimony, it was very specific. Dr. Maureen Bradley's testimony, which was read into the record, as well as Dr. Benowitz's testimony, talks about that the color may change when there's exposure to the elements. Things like being out on a balcony because of the exposure to the air, or just simply being stored in a syringe can affect the color of nicotine. But the breakdown which Ms. Bernstein-Lev talks to you about is something different. The breakdown of nicotine outside of the body can take years. It can take months. Now, if that's true, well, that's not true in this case because we heard from Dr. Wu, who tested this syringe over a year after this crime happened in July of 2022. That syringe still contained about 87% nicotine. That was the purity level of this specific syringe. And as that Dr. Benowitz testified, that is a lethal dose of nicotine in that syringe. Now, why bring that? You know, Ms. Bernstein-Lev's correct. This is not like a typical weapon you see when murders are committed. It's not a gun, it's not a knife, but it is a weapon of choice by the defendant and it was chosen on purpose. Now, he had to do some work. He had to do his due diligence in determining this weapon, right? He was able to do his due diligence and find out that how much of nicotine would needed to be used in order to kill someone. How would you administer it? You know, how much do you need of this substance to actually be able to kill someone? He had to find out all of those questions before arming himself with this weapon. And in conducting this due diligence, he was able to even determine that this poison of choice that he used is undetected by ordinary laboratories from local law enforcement, that it needs special testing to be detected in someone's bloodstream or in someone's body. And contrary to what Ms. Bernstein-Lev says, you don't have to inject this to kill someone intravenously. You could do it intramuscular, through intramuscular. I mean, you could poke anybody anywhere in their body for them to die from this lethal dose of nicotine. It doesn't have to be directly into the bloodstream.
well,
So why bring this?
now I feel scared of everyone.
The intent here is to kill Amy Harwick with it. When you look at the syringe, as well as all of the other steps of preparation the defendant took, it goes to show his intent to kill, and he did it with premeditation and deliberation. What else? He covers the cameras when he gets to the landing. 2 different cameras for 10 seconds to stop the recording, stop the motion of those cameras from capturing. Now, if you just want to talk to someone, why do you care whether your identification shows up in somebody else's cameras? That doesn't make any sense. If he didn't intend to kill Amy Harwick or had no ill intent towards her, then why do this? And then he climbs that chain link fence and then breaks into Amy's house. If he wants to talk to her, why do you have to break into her house? Wait outside, leave her a note. Send her
because she
another
doesn't
5
like him.
text messages and voicemails. Why break into her home? Then he breaks into her home,
Do I have to get out?
goes upstairs, where he's lying in wait for nearly 4 hours till Amy gets home. And remember, the defendant is 6'4", 230, and pretty muscular and a fit guy, and he's waiting for her in her home in the dark. This is a picture from the body-worn video of Officer Fisick, and that's how it looked when they arrived. So he's waiting in the dark for her. I mean, I watched Monday Night Football last night, and that takes, what, about 3 or 4 hours? So he was waiting just as long as it took me to watch a football game, including timeouts and TV commercials. That's how long he was waiting for her before he killed her. And in those 4 hours, the defendant never decided to change his mind. He didn't decide to go home and say, this is a really bad idea. He didn't decide to go outside, wait on the curb for her. None of that. He stayed upstairs on the 3rd story of Amy's home till she came home so that she could kill her. Premeditation, deliberation. Now, admittedly, the defendant didn't kill Amy by injecting her with nicotine. That was his original plan. Now, just because he didn't kill her in the way he originally intended to kill her, doesn't mean that he didn't possess the intent to kill, that he didn't kill her with premeditation and deliberation. Now, it's okay that there's a different method of murder here. His intent was very clear. He carried the syringe into the home. He prepared for that murder with the way he was dressed, with his actions. And when Michael Herman yells, "Hey, motherfucker," he's essentially the one that thwarts the original plan. As you heard in evidence, she was beating up Amy. He was strangling her to the point of unconsciousness or a very weakened state. And when the defendant hears Michael Herman yell, "Hey, motherfucker," from these stairs, he reacts. He decides to pick up Amy and drop her over the balcony to her death, because he does this on purpose. He doesn't want her to live to be able to implicate him in any of his crimes. And then he immediately runs away. Now, I want to talk to you about the defendant's life. And like Mr. Avila said, I'm going to echo this. His conduct, the defendant's conduct before, during, and after the murder speak volumes to his guilt. It speaks volumes to his intent. Now, if we're to assume from the defense that it was Amy that initially provoked him into this fight, and that she on her own went over this balcony, why is it that he just flees the scene? There's a jury instruction specifically to this point. If the defendant fled, that conduct may show that he was aware of his guilt. He runs outside the side door of the kitchen and out from which he came, which is the chain link fence, and we know that from Ring videos. And in order to do that, he has to run just by Amy's body. It looks farther than the photograph, but as Mr. Avila talked about, it's very close. In order to jump that fence and go back to the neighbor's property, you're going to see Amy's body. So this man who allegedly loves her, is so desperate to talk to her, cares for her, runs by her lifeless body on the pavement. He doesn't go to render her aid. I mean, if he was just there to talk to her and she fell on her own, why run away? Why not go and help her and see if she's okay? Why not go talk to Michael Herman and explain yourself? Call 911, call an ambulance, call the police, do something. His decision was to run away and leave her to die. That goes to show his guilt. Something else that goes to show his guilt is that within 46 minutes of committing this murder, let's just say within an hour of committing this murder, he decides to reach out to a girl he met on a dating app, Natasha Paulson, to respond to a text message that she sent hours earlier. Ha ha ha, that's funny. I mean, the defendant's a cold-blooded murderer, right?
Allegedly.
You literally just took someone's life.
Well, I mean, she's a lawyer. She can
Yet
say it.
the first
I'm on
thing you do
the
within an
YouTubes and
hour
they'll yeet
of
me if
murdering
I.
that person, of watching her die, is to text some random woman that you just met on a dating app.
No, Jack, watching her die, that's,
Oh,
she was dead.
The judge is like, I am done with your
The next
shenanigans,
morning,
Helen.
after the murder, what does he decide to do? At around 11 a.m., he texts Angela G, morning sunshine, what are you up to? And then proceeds to hang out with her for a few hours until she's arrested. Again, he's either trying to plan an alibi witness or he really doesn't care about the well-being or welfare of Amy after dropping her over the balcony of her own home. That goes to show who the defendant is. A manipulative, selfish, callous murderer. His cell phone,
let me ask you, guys, how much more do you have?
like 5 minutes.
Okay, good.
His cell phone. The defendant's cell phone is taken into the possession of local law enforcement, and they look for all these text messages that we see, this voicemail, all of that,
I love
and
Norm
it's nowhere
Macdonald.
to be found.
I
It's
wish you
because
were
the
back.
defendant purposefully deletes those text messages.
This was a subject.
It was just, suffice it to say, it was not on his phone.
I'm sorry?
Suffice it to say, it was not on his phone,
Correct.
information, okay.
This information was not on his phone. And he's a smart guy. This was purposefully taken off
Fry-
of his phone.
Do you want-
Objection, it's
It's
Stop.
Reasonable inferences, yes, but we had,
Fry.
I think the court had a ruling with respect to that. So the court characterized what you could say on that.
Sure.
Yeah, so go ahead.
That information was nowhere to be found on his phone. But we know that
Fry.
those messages were sent,
Thor.
those calls were made,
Leave
but they were nowhere
Yeah,
on
they're
his phone. Where did they go?
Where did
How did they disappear? Think about this jail visit that he had with his two friends, Corey and Eigen, as well.
Fryberto? You want the head of shame? Not the head of shame. I'll force you to listen to Gareth's jokes.
Now, the tone of this jail visit has zero reference to any sympathy for Amy. They don't talk about Amy at all. And in the one reference that they do, there's no sympathy there. Doesn't care about her well-being whatsoever.
Oh no.
And despite all the excuses the defense tries to bring
That's
about
a shame.
the tone of this call, about him joking around, laughing, zero sympathy for the victim, those are all excuses Ms. Bernstein-Liv gives you. Excuses for the defendant's consistent bad behavior throughout this entire incident, including this jail call. He even says near the end of the call,
You won that game. Yep. I'm gonna have to change my Twitter handle to quasi bad boy.
he says, I guess I'm officially a bad boy, right?
Oh, what a dink.
This jail call is just a glimpse of who the defendant really is, and that is a callous, cold-blooded murderer. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. He's manipulative and entitled. And defense tries to draw a parallel between the defense's use of humor in this call and Hernando Chavez's use of humor when he's interviewed by the police to deal with his grief. But there's a substantial difference between Hernando Chavez and the defendant, and that is Hernando Chavez did not kill Amy Harmon, and the defendant
Oh,
absolutely.
okay. Oh, all right. You can go
So
lay
it's
down, but
totally
you need to not
inappropriate
bark
use of
at your
your
friend.
You've just been arrested
Word
for
is
murdering
gonna-
someone you
Word
love.
still has
and couldn't
about
get
40
over for
pounds on
over
you.
a decade.
You know.
And this is how you sound in a visit between you and your two friends? Last slide, Your Honor, I promise. Motive.
Yeah,
The law states that
Fry
having
seems to
motivated
think that that's
factor
the best way to make
determining the
friends.
defendant is guilty.
He
And
doesn't
the
understand
defendant
that.
absolutely had
The
a
cats don't
motive.
like him barking at them.
In these text messages that he sends to Amy, they go completely unanswered.
Animals are sometimes
She
better
answers
people
once,
than people.
setting those boundaries, saying she wants no contact with him, and she never responds to him after that. And that makes the defendant angry
But we're pretty cool
because
people here.
she
So.
shut him out. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with him. And because she shut him out, he wanted to punish her. He wanted to punish her by killing her. Just take a look at that jail visit. Take into account how he murdered Amy. It was a brutal way to kill somebody and very personal. When you take that into account, it shows just how angry the defendant is. It shows the true glimpse into his motive. And that is he wanted Amy to suffer. Think about it. You saw the wounds to her head and her hands in defending herself. The defendant struck her in the face repeatedly, causing a nose fracture. Frankly, this was a beatdown. Let's just call it what it is. It was a beatdown. And then he strangled her to the point of unconsciousness, to the point of a weakened state, and it caused her to urinate all over herself. And then he threw her or tossed her, dropped her over the balcony, plummeting to her death. And Amy screamed. Amy struggled. Amy fought for her life. Yet the defendant doled out his final punishment on Amy Harwick during that beatdown, during that strangulation. Instead of leaving her on the third story of her home, beaten and bruised, his final punishment was to pick up her body and drop her over that balcony. That was his true motive, to watch her suffer. And I ask you to hold the defendant responsible for his heinous actions. Because he's a callous, selfish, entitled, and manipulative, cold-blooded murderer. So please find him guilty of the crimes of first-degree murder, burglary, and find true the special circumstance of blinding light. Thank you.
All right, let's have the clerk swear in the bailiff, if you would, please.
Do you solemnly swear that you will take charge of the jury and keep them together, and you will not speak to them yourself, nor allow anyone else
Helen's
to
like,
speak to
I
them
don't
upon
think
matters
we're
connected to
gonna
their
win
case,
this,
except
Gareth.
on order of the court, and when they agree upon a verdict, to return it into court. Also, you do solemnly swear that you will take charge of the alternate jurors and keep them apart from the jury while they are deliberating on the cause until otherwise instructed by the court, so help you God.
I do. Can I get a stipulation from counsel that the jurors may be dismissed at all recesses without the presence of court counsel or the defendant?
Yes.
All right. Bailiff,
Reporting time tomorrow, Judge, 9:30.
9:30.
Okay, Judge, you go ahead and leave your juror notebooks on the chairs at the property, and we'll go ahead and give you instructions further tomorrow morning at 9:30.
Have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, so that's it. I do know, let me check one thing real quick while we get this. Oh, I have no idea what I did. As per usual, I'm working with technology and I'm not quite sure what I did. I know you're going to be shocked. Your shock, I'm sure, is amazed. But let me see if I can get the current verdict watch up. It looks like, well, let's see what the, well, it looks like for, I can get this pulled up over here. It looks like share screen, verdict watch. We can go over to see their chat right now. It does look like, for right now, the Law and Crime has him at 89% first degree murder. And it's odd that Law and Crime, we usually disagree about everything. Let me see what is going on with my. There we go. Now it's back on. But it does seem like they're actually in agreement with us this time. So, I mean, only 4% of people think he should get manslaughter, which that's helpful. I mean, for once. And yeah, usually they're pro prosecution. So as most of the time, I don't generally go with anything they have to say ever. But they seem to be generally in line with us. But I mean, this case was not a whodunit. I mean, it was a more of a, I mean, can we call him guilty now? And what level I, I can we get him for at this point? And I think that really you can't I don't think you can really say that the defense did a stellar job. Oh, that's my if I was going to pick up the boys. It's just at this point, I don't know that anything beyond him getting up and saying, "Someone else did it, I swear," would do anything, and there's no way. I mean, they have him on camera. What what would at any point this do? It just I cannot tell you how utterly gross and offensive I found the defense. I am glad that the state, came back and rebutted all the things, though the defense seemed ultra salty about just about everything she said to begin with. So, I do think that, you know hello, Melissa Jane. I do think it was pretty cool how I don't know if they workshopped, and I'll have to ask one of the real lawyers eventually how maybe the state, because they did have some of the PowerPoint kind of figured out. So I do want to know if maybe they workshopped some of the ideas uh, that they went ahead and put in there as the rebuttal, maybe if they had a kind of inkling about what the defense was going to try to pull, because it looks like they kind of had a PowerPoint and kind of had an idea of what they were going to say prior to it, because they did have some stuff pulled up, and I wanna see if maybe that is what they kind of did that, and then she had key points that she wanted to go over, because well, I don't know that I put the notification on, Twitter, and I don't know that I put notifications on my Discord. I might not have remembered to do that because I'm also trying to make sure that the boys get their paperwork packet done. And yes, my, oldest son had not charged his Chromebook today and was not wearing his glasses for the last week, so he's been hiding his glasses in his backpack and not telling anyone. So, I'm gonna have to do that. Well, that also could be a problem. But it does look like, you know, people are sort of it's not that hard a case. I mean, honestly, it's not going to be a whodunit. I'm actually shocked that it it's taken them this long, but I would say probably sometime when Excited and Sal are on, and I will try to come on for a little bit and then do nightly newsy news. I'm going to have Mr. Mo take the kids out and, for the party because it is kind of rainy and cloudy today. It's the right day, but, I do not do well with the rainy, cloudy kinda days, so I'll probably stay home. I will do nightly newsy news, and I bet around that time is where we're gonna get the verdict. Because I'm guessing that the jury does not want to be here during lunchtime or during Friday. I don't think they're gonna wanna spend their Friday doing this. Yeah, I seem to be getting a lot of Daryl Brooks stuff. You know what's funny is when I get recommended myself. That's the weird thing. I'll get, "Hey, do you know Mo in the Deep End?" And I'm like, "No, I have no idea who she is." Let me see if I can pull up anything related that's kind of short, and we can see if we can find something like, just watch me. Here, let me pull this one down for a second, and we can all just how do I do we'll just all watch Fry for a minute while I try to find something. He sleeps like that too. I've never seen a dog sleep like that. It's fairly interesting. Did you guys end up watching the doctor or the brothers testimony with the guy from Law and Crime, Sal? That's what I was wondering. I didn't know if they had if EU and okay, we'll see if we can. I mean, I know puppy cam is all the awesome, but I did promise that we would do something at least a little, you know, brand related, or at least slightly crime tube related, law tube, lay tube. I do like her with the more subtle, understated makeup, but that's just my preference.
Relationship and sex therapist originally from Pennsylvania. And she was quite high profile in Los Angeles. She was even engaged to comedian and Price is Right host Drew Carey at one point in time. And Dr. Harwick appeared in magazines, podcasts, TV news. Here's the deputy district attorney delivering the state's opening statement, explaining what they claim happened.
He broke into her house on Valentine's Day. He broke in there with a syringe.
I still think we need to put an APB out for this chick because we have not seen hide nor hair of this woman since the first day. I think they admonished her greatly for having the see-through shirt. Well, not the see-through, but the the flesh tone color shirt of unfortunate tone.
Syringe loaded with a lethal dose of nicotine. And then he waited for her until she got home. He waited there for hours for her. When she arrived, she went up to her third story bedroom and got caught by surprise by the defendant. He immediately attacked her, as evidence will show. He strangled her. And then her roommate, who was asleep in the bottom level, heard the screaming and yelled out, "Leave her alone."
His hair has gotten greasier every day of the trial. I really don't think he's watched it since day one. And I would like you to notice the bailiff's hands. They are skinny in comparison. I'm not saying they're thin, but they are slender in comparison to the general bailiff's form. These are weird things that I've noticed during the trial, and I've decided to point them out to you.
The evidence is going to show the defendant panicked at that moment, took Amy's Harwick debilitated body over to her bedroom balcony, lifted her up over the balcony, and dropped her to her death. You can hear that she suffered injuries to her body. Her pelvis was shattered, liver damage, brain damage, and the defendant fled the scene.
So it's believed that she was thrown over the third-story balcony. Medical examiner would determine her death a homicide, meaning that she was killed by somebody else, and that she died from manual strangulation and blunt force trauma. She was rushed to the hospital. She was pronounced dead.
Okay, I'm going to skip past him talking a little bit because we're going to get just to the brother.
Welcome right now to Sidebar, her brother, Christopher Harwick. Christopher, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar. First of all, we haven't met before. I just want to say, in following the case, I am
I can
so
still
sorry
hear.
for your loss, for your family's
I'm just
loss. And I
going
know
to check on the
particularly
walking
now,
wounded real
with
quick.
the trial going on, this must be a difficult time. So I appreciate you coming on to talk to us a little bit more about this.
Of course, I really appreciate you guys having me.
I want to start off just to get a little bit better understanding about your sister, who she was and what she was like.
So, I guess for what the family kind of wants to convey about my sister, growing up, Amy was just like any other, teenage girl. She liked hanging out with friends, going to parties, and her and I had, I would call it, a pretty normal brother and sister relationship. We had our ups and downs, brothers and sisters fight. We would try to hang out as much as we could. We would go to concerts together, and just have a lot of fun that way. In 2001, when she moved out to California, she was very excited to do that and start her life out there. She was married to a guy in a band. He was a great guy, but unfortunately, it just didn't work out. And she decided to stay out there and pursue her career and her schooling.
I mean, this poor guy, I think that sometimes in the spin of things, I'm really not sure about that green color, but we I mean, here it is. This guy, Gareth, has basically we have to sit through Gareth making it Amy's fault and his defense attorney making it Amy's fault too. And I can only imagine having to sit there, I mean, in the courtroom and listening to the defense attorney basically say, "Look, well, but she threw the first punch."
And Amy was very career driven. She knew what she wanted to do. She, went to school, got her master's degree, and then eventually got her doctorate in psychology and family and sex therapy. And she wrote a book. She was probably one of the most career driven people I've ever met. She loved to help people. That was her goal in life, was to to be a good person and to be there for anybody that reached their hand out for help. Unfortunately, I think she was in her prime. She had a great career going. Her life was moving in the right direction, and tragically, it was cut short.
From what I've heard from people who've talked about her and I've seen videos, she seemed like such a happy person. You talk about her being career driven, and she was very successful. And I agree with you. I think she was in her prime. She had a lot more to offer the world, but she just seemed like such a happy person. And people who were friends with her
Yeah,
would say that she seemed so genuinely interested in them, and it was kind of like a magnetic
I want that
thing.
scarf.
Do I have the right idea about your sister?
Absolutely, she,
Yeah.
her and I would have conversations. I'd ask her, how she was doing. But then, more often than not, she wanted to see what I was doing, what I was up to. I
Right.
mean, her and I were, separated by, you know, 3,000 miles. She was in California and I was in Pennsylvania. And I knew a number of times, her and I were separated by, by an ocean plus, when I was like deployed overseas. And she'd always ask me how I was doing, in
Well,
those certain circumstances. But I was really interested in what she was doing. But she really tried to focus on me, which I always kind of thought that was kind of cool about my sister.
well, and I do like that she was I mean, look, I you can feel whatever way you wanna feel, and I have my own thoughts about the adult film industry, but who thinks about how difficult it would be to get mental health awareness, I to get mental health help when you are in that situation? I'm sure a lot of therapists, even in, California, may have preconceived notions about people who work in the adult film industry and getting help for, any sort of mental health. Look, the name that wasn't it like Pineapple Advocacy or something? I'm sure it it was, you know, it was a hilarious name. I can't remember exactly. But, when she felt something about something, she went for it, and her videos were doing something. Unfortunately, in these cases, sometimes the victim gets a bit lost. So I am glad that Law and Crime, even though they're kind of butt monkeys about copyright, they did get time to, uh, go out and give Amy a little bit of time and attention and give her more of a well-rounded, well, perspective. She's not just the victim in this case. She did a lot of work prior to becoming a victim in this case. She had a life beforehand.
My sister. Um, Sometimes she was hard to get a hold of. Her life was very busy. She had a lot of things going on, with her career and with friends and doing side jobs and the other cool stuff that she was into. Her life was, it always seemed it was always full of things to do and fun things to do. There was very hardly any time where I really thought that she kind of like sat down and like chilled out for a while. She was just a very, very busy person.
And first, let me just say thank you for your service as well to the country. If you can, do you remember the last time you spoke to her on the phone?
Sure. Last time I spoke to her, it was over like Facebook Messenger. And I was just about ready to redeploy out of Afghanistan. I guess I would have been in January of 2020, right at the end of January. And this would have been a couple of days after her interaction with Gareth. And she didn't allude to any negative feelings that she was having of being afraid. She didn't tell me at all about any of this stuff, and I kind of wish she would have, opened up to me about that. She really just tried to make it a more positive experience, because our conversation. Because I was getting ready to come home, I was gone for a year, and the circumstances that I was in, she really didn't want to, like, I guess, put that on me.
So
and make
in other
me
words,
worry.
she didn't even tell you that she ran into him.
No. Mm-mm.
And she wasn't saying anything about being afraid. She was just more focused on you at the time.
Correct. And her cat. She
Yeah.
showed me a lot of her cat because Marquis, the cat was her main squeeze.
Oh,
How did you find out what happened?
Like that
That she
the
was
incident
killed.
had happened.
Yeah.
So I had just got back from Afghanistan like a couple of days before, and my wife and I went to Charleston, South Carolina for like a little Valentine's Day weekend, and my parents
oh,
were at our house, at my house, watching our kids.
oh, how
And
awful.
uh, it was probably, I'd say, maybe 11 o'clock at night, and my wife's daughter was texting her saying that the police were at our house. So we're like, well, that's kind of strange. Like that's never happened before. So I tried to call my dad, and he finally answered. And I said, hey, like, why are the police at at the house? And that's when he told me that yeah, Amy's been murdered. And it was it was like kind of one of those things where you never in a million years thought you would ever hear that. So it caught me by surprise, and it caught my wife by surprise. All of us, it caught all of us by surprise. And um, I got a phone with him, and we packed up all of our stuff, and we immediately drove home, um, uh, and got back that, I guess it was that Sunday morning. And it's just kind of one of those things that you never really expect to hear or ever think of hearing, that those words come out of anybody's mouth in your family, that one of your family members has been killed.
It's incredibly difficult to think about, and I'm so sorry for you and your family. And I can only imagine what that was like and hearing that. But Gareth Purshouse's name came into the mix relatively quickly. I mean, they arrested him pretty quickly. When you found out that he was arrested for the murder of your sister, were you shocked? Were you surprised? You knew who he was, right?
Yeah. So I met Gareth in, I want to say it was either late 2009 or early 2010, when a buddy of mine flew out to LA to spend about a week with my sister. after I had gotten back from another deployment. This time, that time was in Iraq, and I met him. I didn't have a
Okay.
lot of interaction with
I was about to say, sir, did you think he was a giant douche canoe too? And by that face, I'm gonna go with yes.
him. The majority of our time out there was pretty much just with my sister and her friends. There was I honestly can't remember, how long I spent with her and Gareth. It could have been more than a day, uh, but I heard things from my mom when her and I would talk about things, because Amy never. I wasn't like Amy's like confidant. Like, she wouldn't like
Right.
divulge the certain types of things to me. And she never really divulged anything negative to me. It was really like I said, before, it was more everything she tried to keep on the up and up between
Did you
us.
did you ever get a weird feeling when you were talking to him?
Um, I, I mean, his profession, like, his lifestyle, like, I wouldn't have really agreed with it, but
What was his
that's what he was doing
lifestyle?
as work. But we spent such little time together, interacting. I don't think I really got a good feeling of who the person was, because it was just so short, and I wasn't really focused on him. It was more of trying to spend time with
Right.
my sister.
Do you think he did this?
Well, and this again, this is just me talking. I believe with the wholeheartedness of my heart that Gareth is responsible for Amy's death.
What makes you say that? Because his defense team, let me just tell you what they said in their opening statement. They said that the evidence is going to show that running into her at the event that he ran into her before the killing put him into depression, that he never, he was in
Oh my
pain.
gosh.
He said the evidence will show that he never intended to kill her. And they said that, one of the ways the jury might look at this is that he didn't throw your sister over the balcony, that she ran to the railing to run away from him, and that she was trying to get away and she fell. And they say that he didn't intend to kill her. What do you make of that?
So
This is where you see a man trying to not curse on television. And he's like, "How do I say this is effing bull s without saying this is effing bull s to this man who looks like a weird plastic Ken doll who's been tanned? And is it against the law in California to button the top 3 buttons of your shirt when you're a male? I guess so. Okay." This man is like, "I can't say he's a dumbass. I can't say he's a dumbass. I can't say I don't give a flying F what they say. Okay, and go."
Amy was a very intelligent person. She had lived in that house for a long time, and with some of the evidence that I've seen from some, prior, court hearings, like we went to the preliminary hearing, um, there was some of the evidence that was given there, some of the testimony that some of the people gave. And I'm trying not, I don't want to talk a whole lot about the case, because I don't want,
Right. Right.
you know, um, so just all those things, like, in my mind, to me personally, um, point to him being as the person that, like, he intended to do it. He went there. Nobody goes to somebody's house and breaks in for a good reason. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well, sir, you obviously hadn't read or haven't seen the defense closing. He was there to talk to her. She is the only therapist in California.
again, I don't want to get into, some of
Right.
the.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you plan to attend the trial at all?
So I would like to go out there. The plan is for me to go out there during the latter part of it. I would like to see, closing arguments, and the verdict,
Yep.
whatever the jury decides. It's just with a full-time job and kids and life. It's hard for me to. I really can't just go out there for the whole thing, even though I would like to be out there. To be with my parents and to support them and her friends through this whole process. It just wasn't, it's just not the right thing to do with my job and all that stuff.
No,
Uh,
I
so,
understand.
I do plan on going out there. Just when, we just kind of have to wait and see how the trial progresses, and the assistant DAs will kind of let us know when they think that these milestones are gonna happen, and when it's a good time for me to come out there.
I know you can't talk about the trial, but just generally speaking, do you feel confident in the state's case?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I heard, like I've I've met the assistant DAs and their team a couple times, and um, they're very passionate about it. Um, I, I believe that their case is pretty solid, and they believe that their case is pretty solid. My parents believe that their case is real solid, so there should be no, um, you know, we don't have any misgivings about their their performance that they're going to make, and the case that they're going to make against them. So
Right.
we're 100% confident in those guys.
Um, I know you said that you weren't your sister's confidant. There was, evidence coming out that she was fearful of Gareth, that she took out a protective order, at least one, believe two. There was in the opening statements by the prosecution, they talked about an email that she wrote to herself, talking about how scared she was of Gareth during the course of the last several years. Did she ever say anything to you that would strike you as she was nervous about him in any way?
So I mean, she might have mentioned it, like, hey, do you remember the guy that you met? We're not together anymore, and he was just. She never really gave any specifics, uh, to me.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
so
She really kind of just said,
when you are dealing with someone who has, let's say, been emotionally abusive, they break you down in such a way that you feel very ashamed and shameful that you let it happen. And even a therapist, I'm sure, would feel some of that shame, even more so, my guess is, because she probably saw all the signs and, still got caught up in that kind of thing. So I'm sure she didn't want to tell her brother that she had made, a mistake in who she had fallen in love with and, had a relationship with, and air her dirty laundry all over the place. It's definitely not one of those things that you wanna go out and say, "Hey, I, dated a douche and he was turned out to be a super douche. I had to get a protective order," and all of those things. So, and I'm sure she also didn't wanna add to his burden while he's out on tours, in different countries, in the military, while he has while he has a wife and children and he's a husband and a father. I'm sure she probably minimized her own situation in her head, focused on him, and did just kind of what people do in these situations. Again, it's a shameful thing. You don't want to kind of admit to people that you've, so thoroughly misjudged someone's character that poorly, that you've allowed yourself to be that vulnerable and let yourself be, worn down that much. It takes time to build yourself back up. It takes time to, feel more confident about yourself. And maybe about the time, I mean, it could take years, maybe by the time that she felt more confident, better about herself, and maybe willing and able to open up with her brother because she, you know, got into a safer space. She felt better. He was out of the military and done with tours. Gareth just happens to pop back into her life like a freaking boil on the butt of humanity, and, you know, eh, 2 weeks later or less than a month later, she's gone. So, unfortunately, I don't think hopefully her brother was able to make it to closing arguments. Hopefully he had an emotional support vodka after the defense, whatever that was, or someone holding him back because, oh my goodness, as a family member, I could not with that. Uh, I would have been I would have needed to walk out of the room. I will be very honest with you. Had I been a family member of Amy, I would have needed to get out of the room with the defense attorney, with Helen Lovejoy. I would not have been able to maintain a civil tongue. I would have started laughing and said some BS. Um, so yeah, it would have been incredibly difficult. So I'm sure her parents were there and, bravery for the parents and family and friends who sat there and listened to the BS yesterday and were representatives to Amy. I'm probably not going to finish uh, this because it he's kind of just going on to things. He doesn't sound like it sounded like they weren't very yeah, they would have removed me because my face is all caps. I have the turtle boy face times 10. Turtle boy and I are not going to wouldn't be even allowed to sit next to each other because just our face together, if we were in the Karen Reed place, would break the internet, I think. Um, and I need to take Fry out. Uh, I know he is sleeping now, but he has the ability to wake up and piddle as soon as he gets up, and he is on a schedule. But that is the rebuttal, and I will keep an eye out on Verdict. They've been in, let's check Verdict Watch while I am here. Do-do-do. Because the mods are actually okay, so the mods are actually fairly good on law and crime as much as we make fun of them. So, Addie, the, uh, mod just posted something that jury resumed deliberations at, 1:08 Eastern, so it's 5 hours and 52 minutes over 2 days. So they definitely have about 6-ish hours in. So I will try, as I said, Mr. Mo is probably going to take, the boys to the party today, if possible, and I'm going to stay home to do nightly newsy news and, watch for a verdict, and then tomorrow, I think I will be obviously, I will be joining, Nicholas for Shatface for charity, but then I will probably be starting, the Maya case, in earnest because I definitely want to cover that and working on the, charts for getting deeper into Delphi, which doing a deeper dive into the Delphi, memo and that kind of thing next week and continuing with the Maya because we've got a while for Delphi. So, that is my goal. Those are my goals, I think so, possibly. Uh, That's tomorrow time, Sal, I don't even know. It honestly, it'll probably be around 10-ish or maybe 11, uh, so I'm not quite sure. That's tomorrow time. And I don't know, it's, it will depend. We have a lot of storms coming through, and the weather is getting colder, so my body is taking a little bit of time to adjust, so we will see how that goes. For tomorrow, I will let you guys know. I'm trying to get better at putting everything everywhere. Like I said, I need an assistant who works for Hot Pockets, but generic Hot Pockets. Great value Hot Pockets. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. And don't forget to join Sal and EU. We will be doing Verdict Watch there. And then I will do Newsy News. And if the verdict comes in, then I will switch over, of course, and invite everyone to my channel for Newsy News time and Verdict time. But I think Baker might still be on for Verdict time there. I'm not quite sure. So if you want to go watch someone else, I think he is still on. So have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. I am going to go take Frybert out and start on some dinner. I think we're having barbecue meatballs tonight. I should know we're having barbecue meatballs because I'm the one making them, but have a great evening. Bye, guys.